Hello, Electric Eel Wheel community. I'm at Rhinebeck at the New York Wool and Sheep Festival this week. I have a booth, and I'll start off by showing you around my booth, and then I'm going to sort of walk around and talk about interesting things for you guys. So this is my booth, and as most of you know, I'm having some inventory shortages, so there's not much here. Just mostly yarn counters, and we've got a couple of the old Nanos and like just a couple of the Electric Eel Wheel 6s that I held back, but it'll be a good festival for showing lots of demos of the Cone Winder, which is on Kickstarter, and we've got the Nano 2 here and the Electric Eel Wheel 6, so it'll be lots of fun having lots of demos. So the discussion that always garners a lot of attention with the community are future projects. So I guess I'll start there and we'll see how long that discussion takes. So right now, I'm obviously working on the Cone Winder. That's my top priority because the Kickstarter for that is currently running, and there's still a fair amount of work to do. I need to finalize the molds. I need to get updated samples of some of the custom parts and make sure everything's working together. There's still a few small software tweaks I want to do, but the last little bit always takes a lot of effort, so I'll be spending a bunch of time there. And I do spend a lot of time managing inventory now, so the Electric Eel Wheel 6s and the Nano 2s are both being shipped to me right now. They're both in shipping containers and on their way, so I need to make sure that those arrive, and there's not a lot of work for me until they arrive, and once they arrive I always help my shippers. The other big engineering project that I'm working on is the Electric Eel Wheel Pro. I've mentioned that's sort of a higher end e-spinner. It's still very far out. I think, a couple of years isn't, it would be my estimation at this point. It's really an ambitious project, so let's just put it at that. So I have covered all of the features in the past that I was looking at, and I've added some more to the list since then. I've actually eliminated some of the ones I mentioned on that list already. So I'm in the middle of writing software for the first prototype, and the first circuit boards were, they had some pretty big issues, and I worked around a lot of them. But several of those have died now, so I'm actually in the process of making a second circuit board already. It's a little sooner than I had hoped to do that, but I think that's the best way to continue software development. So I've got a bunch of software for various sensors and things, and I proved that a bunch of those are working, but I haven't really done any testing with the full system or with the motors yet. So I would say that the dual motor solution is something that's I think is going to solve a lot of problems. I'm really excited about that. And I know that the community's most loved feature is the level winding feature, which auto winds the yarn onto the bobbin so you don't have to move the hooks. So those are kind of the top two signature items that I'm working on, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to experiment with and see if it makes sense to move it into this higher end e-spinner. I really want to not rush into it. I want to take the time, a little more time than I would have in the past, and experiment and figure out what makes sense, what doesn't, and really release an amazing first version of this e-spinner. But because of all of that, it's going to take a very long time. So the next thing I'm going to work on will be discussed in a poll. One that I've heard a lot of interest in is circular sock machines or circular knitting machines. And with that, I would also say flatbed machines. I'm not really sure which of those two I would end up doing. I understand a fair amount. I've done a 3D model of one that worked, but I wasn't happy with it. And at that point I realized, in order to really do a CSM is a huge effort, because I would have to, first off, I would have to learn to be
a decent user of these machines, which is a big task. And I would have to wrangle in some experts from the community, and I would bring them in and sort of get their feedback on what features are most important and how I should go forward. Another thing that I've gotten a lot of interest in lately is just making a jumbo e-spinners. This one wouldn't be that much work because I would probably just have to find a different motor, and then other than that, I know how e-spinners work pretty well, and I could design an e-spinner, that have bobbins to hold 1 or 2 pounds of yarn, really bulky art yarn, supported better than my existing e-spinners, something that sort of specializes in that. I don't know how big the market is, but it wouldn't be that hard for me to make something like that. It's still a lot of effort to, manufacture it and stuff, but certainly the first prototype is something I could get done more quickly on that than some of these other things I've been mentioning. Another thing on my list is a cake winder. So that just makes balls of yarn. But related to that, I could make a machine that winds a true ball, which is something I've never seen anyone do. So people can make true balls by hand, but I've never seen a machine that does that with yarn. I kind of have seen machines that wind the inner core on baseballs, and I'm like, oh, that could be adopted to actually make a true round ball of yarn with a machine. I don't think it's like super practical, and I do like to make practical machines. I think like a cake winder is probably a more practical way to wind balls of yarn, but this would be kind of cool and something new, and maybe there's a reason that having true balls would be better. I mean, people would certainly like the visual look of having a true ball in certain circumstances, but I'm not sure how interested the community would be in that, since I haven't really mentioned it before. There's and related to these is the way that I don't even know what they're called, but like the way you buy a skein of yarn in the store, where it's kind of in that elongated capsule or ellipse or something. I don't know what, it's a ball of yarn from the store. Basically, the way that those are made is they have an inflated interior, or like kind of like this industrial balloon that inflates in the inside. Then they wind the yarn around that, and then they deflate the balloon, and then that gives it a really loose tension. It's kind of like a cake winder, but a more complex machine. But I've never seen a consumer version of that kind of a yarn ball winder. So I think that would also be sort of related to those. And if the community's interested in that direction, I'd pick one of those 3 options. Not really sure which. Another thing that's on my list is a drum carder. And I've mentioned this before, but just standard drum carders have a single drum and one smaller drum to feed them. But if you look at like cottage carders, that's the kind of machine that automatically pulls fiber onto the drum and then has different little smaller drums to sort of smooth it out, and then ones that remove it from the larger drum, so you don't have to do the process of removing the fiber by hand, which is sort of the least favorite part of most people with drum carders. And those are typically called cottage carders, and they're big and expensive. But I think that maybe with some electronics, you could reuse the small drums in multiple ways, and that would greatly reduce the cost of sort of that cottage. It would be a hybrid. It wouldn't really be a cottage carder. Another thing would be a manual treadle spinning wheel, and I know there's a lot of them out there, but I've looked through them, and I think that there's a significant gap with a lack of like really travel-friendly treadle wheels. I think that, if you, like every wheel out there, or almost every wheel, has like a single main drive wheel, but you could use like gearing and replace that single large wheel with multiple smaller ones that spin at higher speeds. And with the right gearing, you could really come up with a lot smaller solution. And with my manufacturing techniques, I think I could make that pretty affordable. I'm not exactly sure it would work out. Again, that would be something I'd have to do some experiments with if there's a lot of interest. So you can see that there's I'm kind of running out of time. I need to get back to my booth pretty soon, so I'll cut it off there, I think. But hopefully, this shows I have a lot of ideas and way more than I could ever do. So at some point, I'll write a bunch of these and some other ones down and see what the community likes best. But before then, feel free to discuss these in the comments or offer up additional ideas that I should consider putting on my list of things to vote for next time. Thanks for watching.